Hello, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're exploring something that often feels counterintuitive, the power of silence, especially in the aftermath of heartbreak. When someone we care about pulls away or walks out of our lives, our first instinct is usually to react. We want to reach out, explain ourselves, ask questions, or seek closure. But what if the most potent response is no response at all? This video isn't about playing games or trying to win someone back. It's about rediscovering your strength by choosing stillness over chaos. When you select silence, not out of anger, but out of self-respect, you break the cycle of emotional dependency. You reclaim your energy, your time, and your focus, and in doing so, you shift the dynamic, not to hurt anyone, but to heal yourself. We'll dive into how silence becomes a form of emotional mastery when practiced with intention. We'll talk about the Stoic principle of controlling what you can and releasing what you can't, how absence can build attraction, and why fundamental transformation happens away from the spotlight. You'll learn to stop reacting and start rebuilding, quietly, intentionally, and powerfully. So, if you've ever found yourself caught in the pain of being left behind, stay with me until the end of this video. You may discover that silence isn't emptiness, it's a message, and sometimes it's the most eloquent one you can send. Let's get into it. Number 1. The power she never expected, when silence speaks for you. There's a moment after heartbreak when every instinct tells you to reach out, to explain, to plead, to fix. But silence steps in as a quiet rebellion against that urge. It doesn't scream or demand attention, it simply removes it. In the face of emotional chaos, silence becomes a man's calm refusal to be pulled back into a story that no longer serves him. And to her surprise, it speaks louder than anything he could say. She expects the usual pattern, the apology text, the late-night calls, the messages ask why. That's how most men respond when they feel loss. They chase the emotional closure she withholds. But something shifts when he says nothing, when his presence disappears from her world without drama or resentment. She's left not with answers, but with questions. Why hasn't he reached out? Does he not care anymore? Was it that easy for him to walk away? That stillness unsettles her. It breaks the rhythm she was ready to play. Silence denies her access to the one thing she thought she could count on, his attention. It dismantles the control she held over the emotional narrative. When a man doesn't react, he doesn't just withhold his words, he reclaims his energy. In doing so, he removes her from the center of his emotional universe. This is not a weakness, it is strength in restraint. It's the difference between reacting and responding. One is impulsive, the other intentional. Silence doesn't mean there's nothing to say. It means you've said enough. And that realization echoes loudly in the quiet she's left sitting in. There's an old truth. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can say is nothing. The dynamic changes when a man uses silence not as punishment but as a form of peace. He shows he doesn't need to be heard to have value. He doesn't need to beg to be remembered. In the absence of words, he forces her to feel the weight of his absence, and that's when she starts to understand what his presence means. Number 2, the power in letting go. There comes a moment in every man's journey when he faces a truth he doesn't want to accept. She's slipping away, and there's nothing he can do to stop it. It's tempting to hold tighter, to fight harder, to explain more clearly, or to love more fiercely in hopes that she'll turn around. But that desperate energy rarely brings her back. Instead, it pushes her further away. And the more a man clings, the more powerless he feels. Stoicism offers a quiet but powerful truth in these moments. Control what you can and release what you can't. Her choice, feelings, and path are not yours to hold. You cannot argue someone into staying. You cannot reason someone into loving you again. What you can control is your response, your presence, and your mindset. And that is where your strength lives. Trying to convince someone to stay in emotional slavery, you surrender your peace, clarity, and sense of self in exchange for hope that may never return. It becomes a prison built from fear and longing, but the door to that prison is never locked. Freedom begins when you stop chasing what you don't want to be caught. Acceptance is not weakness. It's courage in its rawest form. It's the quiet decision to stand in the storm without begging the rain to stop. When you stop fighting what you can't control, your energy returns to you. That energy can be used to rebuild and refocus, to become the man who no longer needs to plead for affection. A woman's departure may hurt, but it also offers clarity. It reveals where you've outsourced your power. It shows you where your sense of worth has been tied to things outside your control. But pain is a teacher, and if you're willing to listen, it will teach you how to stand on your own 2 feet again, stronger than before. The moment you stop trying to fix what isn't yours to fix is the moment you begin to heal. You rediscover something essential in that stillness. The man you were before you lost yourself in someone else. That man is not broken, he is waiting. And when you find him again, everything changes. Number 3, the silent pull of absence. Sometimes it's not your presence that draws her closer, but your absence. Something unexpected unfolds when a man quietly steps back without anger or drama. The space he leaves behind becomes a mirror. She begins to notice the silence he used to fill, the calm that once felt ordinary now carries weight. His withdrawal doesn't scream for the attention, it whispers value. Human nature is wired to respond to scarcity. We chase what feels rare and question what we've taken for granted only when it's gone. A man who knows when to step away isn't playing games. He's honoring his worth. And that quiet self-respect speaks louder than any words or actions could. He isn't begging for her attention or trying to force her interest. Instead, he creates space for her curiosity to rise. She starts to wonder, why isn't he chasing? Why does his absence feel heavier than his presence ever did? That wondering plants the seed of attraction, rooted not in his efforts, but in his restraint. His silence becomes a question she wants to answer. His distance becomes a presence she can't ignore. This is not about punishment, it's about clarity. When a woman doesn't feel a man's neediness, she feels his strength. When she doesn't see him chasing validation, she sees him standing on solid ground. That's when she starts to remember the weight of his presence, not as something that asked for her energy, but something that added to her world. There's a quiet power in walking away with dignity. It doesn't slam doors or leave angry messages. It simply lets the absence speak for itself. And often, what it says is louder than anything spoken out loud. You don't need to chase someone who isn't choosing you. And yet, that very act of walking away often shifts the energy entirely, because nothing is more attractive than a man who knows his value and doesn't need to prove it. His absence becomes his presence, and that presence lingers. Number 4, let her feel the silence she chose. There comes a moment when chasing her no longer makes sense. When she pulls away, whether in silence or with words, The most powerful thing you can do is let her sit with the consequences of her choice. Not out of pride, not out of bitterness, but because your presence is not something to be taken for granted. When a woman decides to walk away, the absence she created must be hers to carry. It's tempting to reach out, check in, and soften the space she left behind. You might convince yourself you're being kind or mature, but every time you step in to rescue her from the discomfort of her decision, you blur the line between love and self-abandonment. She must learn that your attention is a gift, not a guarantee. She must understand that intimacy is not something she can pause and resume at will without consequence. Often, women expect that the man will remain there, available, understanding, and ready to resume the moment they return. But genuine respect is built in absence just as much as in presence. When she realizes the world didn't wait for her, that you didn't orbit her indecision, something inside her shifts. Regret doesn't come from your anger. It comes from your silence, from the space you no longer fill. You teach her more by doing nothing than by chasing. Your absence becomes the mirror she didn't expect. And in that mirror she sees the version of you who moved on, not with cruelty, but with clarity. She sees that love isn't owed, that emotional safety is built, not withdrawn, and reclaimed without loss. Sometimes the most respectful thing you can do is walk away when she does, to let her feel what life is like without your support, your words, and your presence. Not to punish her, but to honor the truth. Attention is earned, and when it's lost, it leaves a space no one else can fill in quite the same way. As the saying goes, the silence after your absence will echo louder than any words ever could. Let her hear it. Let her sit with it. Let her remember who you were when she had you, and realize what it meant when you stopped trying to stay. Number 5. The power she never sees coming. There's a kind of silence that doesn't mean defeat. It signals transformation. After a woman leaves or pulls away, many men feel the urge to prove something, to show her what she lost or to win her back. But real change doesn't come from trying to impress her. It comes from focusing inward and rising for yourself, not for someone else. This growth happens in private. He trains hard, reads more, and thinks deeper. He doesn't announce his progress. He disappears. Not to hide, but to rebuild. He stops chasing her attention and starts earning his respect. The pain she left becomes fuel, not for revenge, but for reinvention. She expects weakness, regret, and maybe a plea. Instead, she gets silence. No arguments, no explanations, just distance. And that quiet absence becomes loud in its way. When she finally sees him again, he's not who he was. His posture speaks of discipline. His eyes carry peace, not pain. There's no bitterness, just evolution. He didn't rise to prove her wrong. He rose to become someone better than who she left. And that is the shift she never saw coming. The man who no longer needs the validation he once craved. Number 6. The man who feels without falling. A woman is drawn to a man because he feels deeply and doesn't collapse under the weight of those feelings. His strength isn't in shutting down emotion, but in mastering it. When she sees him handle pain calmly, not anger or desperation, she senses something rare. A man in control of himself, even in chaos. Pain visits every man. What sets one apart is how he responds. While others react or retreat, he channels it into growth. He listens to emotion without obeying it. He doesn't let heartbreak define his worth, Instead, he lets it refine his direction. This is not detachment but discipline. He feels, but he chooses what to do with that feeling. Women notice this not as coldness but as stability. A man who holds steady through challenge radiates a sense of safety. He doesn't chase approval or beg to be chosen again. He chooses himself. In silence, he works. In the gym, focus and personal ambition. That quiet, consistent effort speaks louder than emotional outbursts ever could. Emotional mastery isn't the absence of feeling, it's the ability to feel deeply without losing direction. A man might be heartbroken, but still keep his standards. He might be disappointed, but still show respect. He doesn't need to announce his pain to the world. He lets the work speak. There's quiet power in a man who can say, "Yes, this hurt, but I'm still standing." That kind of resilience draws people in. He won't crumble under pressure. He won't weaponize emotion. He becomes trustworthy, not because he feels less, but because he feels wise. And that wisdom is what makes him unforgettable. Number 7, the power of saying nothing. There comes a time when words lose their meaning. The explanations, the justifications, and the repeated defenses all begin to sound like noise in a conversation that no longer matters. And sometimes, the most potent message a man can send is silence. When she sends a message designed to provoke or asks questions to pull you back in, no response isn't avoidance. It's a clear boundary. The refusal to feed a cycle drains your peace and weakens your self-respect. She may interpret your silence as coldness, but it's not punishment, protection. It's choosing not to explain what you've already said too often. It's stepping out of a dynamic where your value is questioned and your patience tested. Silence speaks volumes. It ends confusion and removes performance. It doesn't beg or chase. It simply stands. And in its stillness is strength. A quiet yet firm declaration of worth. Many men seek closure through conversation, but closure often comes from choosing not to respond. As the saying goes, don't respond to what doesn't deserve a response. And when she hears nothing, she's left with what you've taken away, your energy, presence, and attention. In that quiet, she may finally notice the weight of your absence. Number 8, the exit that sets you free. When she leaves, it's easy to see it as a failure. The silence she leaves behind feels like rejection, the absence of proof that you weren't enough. But the truth is often quieter than pain allows us to hear. Her departure isn't a punishment. It's a redirection. Sometimes, the ending is the most precise mirror. You start to see what you couldn't before, how much you bent to keep peace, how often you overlooked your needs just to keep something that no longer served you. Her walking away pulls the curtain back and exposes the truth. It was never about her staying. It was about you finally seeing. Pain has a strange way of teaching what comfort hides. It sharpens your awareness, deepens your understanding, and challenges the story you've told yourself. You're not a victim of what happened. You're a student of it. And what you learn now will shape who you become next. This isn't the moment to beg or rewrite the past. It's the moment to reclaim your voice and rebuild your boundaries stronger than before. What once felt like a loss is the clearing where strength takes root. You realize you were accepted. You were rerouted back to yourself. There's a quiet wisdom in letting go. Not out of bitterness, but of clarity. And the man who learns from what hurt him doesn't just heal, he evolves. As the saying goes, sometimes what feels like the end is the beginning of becoming who you were meant to be. Number 9. Become the man you'd look up to. There's a turning point in every man's life when he realizes that chasing approval, hers or anyone else's, only leaves him empty. What lasts isn't the validation you're given, but the strength you build on your own. A man who respects himself doesn't wait for others to recognize his worth. He becomes someone who doesn't flinch when someone leaves because the life he's created is too rooted to be shaken. This isn't about becoming colder or harder, it's about becoming clearer. You stop asking, "What does she think of me?" and start asking, "What do I think of the man I'm becoming?" You start making choices you'd admire in another man that reflect discipline, direction, and quiet confidence that doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. Her attention no longer determines your mood. Her silence no longer threatens your peace. You build routines that sharpen your relationships, challenge you, and a mindset that refuses to settle for less than your potential. She'll feel this shift when she sees it, but you won't be doing it for her by then. You'll be doing it for you. There's something magnetic about a man who's grounded. He doesn't need to announce his value because it speaks in how he carries himself, handles pressure, and how little allows temporary emotions to control lasting decisions. You don't need to become the man she regrets losing. You need to become the man you'd regret not becoming. And when you do, you'll find that respect, both hers and your own, follows naturally without ever needing to be asked for. Number 10. The echo that stays. What remains when a man walks away without anger, without bitterness, without a need to explain? What stays behind when he chooses purpose over action, peace over conflict? It's not noise and it's not chaos. It's the echo of his absence. She won't forget how it felt when the conversation stopped, not because of silence filled with resentment, but because of clarity. There was no door slammed and there was no dramatic exit, just space. A kind of quiet that speaks louder than confrontation ever could. At first she might not notice, but time has a way of turning stillness into questions. Where did he go? Why doesn't he reach out? Why is he okay without me? The power of absence lies in what it reflects. Not spite but strength, not punishment but detachment. When a man is no longer emotionally entangled and stops needing to prove his worth or explain his value, his presence becomes more powerful by disappearing. She starts to hear what he never said, the boundaries he never had to voice, the self-worth he didn't need to announce. As she scrolls through old messages or revisits memories, he's not returning to finish a story. He's already started a new one. And that is what indeed echoes. It was not what was said, but what no longer needed to be. That stillness stays with her. In a world addicted to reaction, the man who responds with nothing becomes unforgettable. There's a truth in these moments. Sometimes the loudest message is left unspoken. She hears it long after he's gone. Not because he tried to be remembered, but because he moved forward without needing to be. In the end, silence is not a retreat. It's a powerful declaration of self-worth. It's the calm after the storm, where clarity replaces chaos and dignity takes the place of desperation. Choosing silence isn't about playing games or seeking revenge. It's about honoring yourself enough to no longer pour energy into someone who decided to walk away. When you stop chasing and start focusing inward, you shift the dynamic entirely. You stop reacting and you begin evolving. This is the essence of Stoic strength, to let go of what you cannot control and invest deeply in what you can. your mindset, discipline, and growth. Let her sit with her decisions while you rise quietly in the shadows, becoming the man who doesn't just survive heartbreak, but is transformed by it. Your silence becomes a mirror she can't look away from, a reminder of what she lost, not through anger, but through grace. And as you rebuild in silence, you'll find that your peace speaks louder than any words ever could. If this message resonated with you, I invite you to share your experiences and thoughts in the comments below. Your story might just help someone else find their strength. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more insights on emotional mastery and self-respect, as well as build unshakable confidence. See you in the next one.